180-16-220. This came before CNI August 20th for approval. Approval of this item would approve each school within the district as having a school improvement plan that is data-driven, promotes a positive impact on school learning, and includes a continuous improvement process pursuant to WAC 180-16-220. Chief Jesse.
Good evening, Wyatt Jesse, Chief of Schools and Continuous Improvement. Yes, I'm here for our annual request to approve our continuous improvement plans for our upcoming 104 schools. So this process really does follow tightly to the state WAC, as you're stating, Director Harris, and we've reviewed the list. We've got all the addresses correct. They all have been posted as of July 1. They've been reviewed multiple times. And so it's not only, this process started actually all the way back in February, where schools are working with their staff, their BLT, moving through the process of really taking it seriously about where we're at, especially under a new strategic plan. And so we've really honed in this spring about making sure that the schools were nesting their goals and their work underneath the strategic plan. And for example, elementary schools with their grade English language arts.
Director Mack.
As we just had a robust conversation around the difference between a school and a building. And last year the request was made by me, and I'm really grateful that it's included now that the addresses are in here, because we move schools so many times and it gets confusing, and having that clarification is really helpful. I was looking through the list though and noticed that 2120 Van Elsel Elementary, given our just recent board approval of the name change, that would be appropriate to change it to Rising Star at African American Academy, right?
So that would take fold, and then we also have to do that work with OSPI, because that has its own process of the recognition of the name. And so there's some technical things that we would go over with OSPI to recognize the change in how it's listed with OSPI.
So can you help clarify for me then, because that's the name of the school now as we just board approved it, but OSPI has a number and a name, and Magnolia and Lincoln don't have their numbers yet. So
that's right.
Where are we at in terms of making those schools OSPI official?
I can give you an update for sure. It's OSPI, so I think sometimes things take a little bit of time in the form package that we present to them. Sometimes there's questions coming back on those form packages, and then they give us, then there's some clarity about what exactly it is, and then they get back to us and then assign a number. As you are very well educated, Dr. Mack, around what it is specifically for the school and it's identified as. So I can get back and I'll put that in a Friday memo.
Will it be updated by the time we actually approve these schools, or not? Will it be in this list appropriately? Because what we're approving technically when we approve this board action is the list of schools and their continuous, that they have in continuous improvement. They have CSIPs. But if the name, will there be a number attached to those two schools, and will Rising Star at African American Academy be corrected on this list?
I can correct the name on the list. How OSPI moves, I'll have to get back to you. Sometimes they don't move so, I'm just being really frank with you, like OSPI just does not move always really quickly on assigning numbers. So I'm just trying to make sure that we do list them. We will present them. That's one of the big requirements by the state, that we recognize those.
I would appreciate for it to be in the bar language, specifically clarifying why they don't have numbers, and
Sure.
what's going on with that, and the expectation for when they will have their number, and if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
Footnotes, footnotes, footnotes. Director Burke.
I just want to share for my colleagues, as always, the continuous school improvement plans create great venue for conversation for directors and staff alike. One of the topics that came up during CNI was the question about, we recognize that there are changes in leadership that happen. And when there's a change in leadership at a school, is the intent that the new leader would develop a new CSIP, or that the new leader would follow the existing one, or somewhere in between, and kind of what should be our expectation from a governance point of view? And the first, there's an understanding that the CSIP is an iterative and kind of living document, but that it also represents the roadmap for the school that was determined by the staff and the BLT and approved. And so an incoming leader has that as a roadmap. And so the expectation that was telegraphed to us was that, explicitly stated to us, was that new leaders would be working within the CSIP that had been developed by the previous staff. And then as they developed their own understanding of the school and other areas for gaps or closure that needed to happen in future versions or future editions, there could be changes. But that was, I think it's just an important thing to have out in the public dialogue.
Director Mack?
I appreciate you bringing that point up, Director Burke, because in the policy, I think there's a specific language around, like, if they're not meeting the goals of the CSIP and it's not being met, then there are certain corrective actions, including replacement of principals and so forth. So can you explain what the process is for checking in on whether or not the CSIPs are being followed as they've been written, and at what point is the leadership of the school, the principal, assistant principal, held accountable in some way for those things? What is our process to intersect?
So the process to intersect, if you even look at the WAC, it does draw out that it's a there's nothing prohibiting schools to use a multi-year process. Just because you nest under and do a certain strategy, are at schools, as Director Burke is kind of leading ourselves down the road of, all right, somebody comes in, new principal or established principal even, the work that has been drawn out there should tie again to the strategic plan. It should have been a good assessment. We now have such a robust involvement of a BLT and their staff that it's not just principal dependent. And then further, our ability, we are now, and I know I've explained some of this with some of the board directors, that's why we are structuring ourselves to center the work of central office to support the CSIP. So it's not just waiting for the school to have their own ability to work in a kind of annualized process and be a compliance, but is actually now something, I think one of you mentioned, ongoing process for continuous improvement. How am I doing? What's going on with students? We now have those assessments, now have data reporting on it. So schools are actually right in the middle of adjusting. I go out in schools in this process, Director Mack, and we engage in conversations. Diane does, Cashel does. I mean, other leaders in central office are out in the schools as well as the directors of schools to coach in with principals and their leadership teams to make adjustments to just those strategies or those systems that they have to correct and to better serve our students, especially our students of color, furthest from educational justice. Ultimately, when there are not a lot of progress, that intensifies the support actually of central office in working with those particular schools.
Director Pinkham, did you have comment, question, concern, sir?
No, nothing. I'm just glad Director Burke brought up the conversation that we had at the CNI meeting, and just always just getting the schools and programs and just making sure we clarify that what's what. Because again, as you look at your list that you have, there's no header to the list, so you just start out with the name. And just taking the first line, there's 2462 Loy Heights Elementary School, elementary, gives the address, city, estate. And then in some of those columns for the elementary, high school, you do put programs. But then Cascade Parent Partnership Program is listed as K through 8. Should be, getting confusion. Is that a program or is that a school?
Those are identified. I just want to jump in there. Those are identified as programs, those specific things, because they're not, and that's actually following our own way that we do our quarterly reporting through CNI on programs that provide unique services.
So I just wondered about that third column. Should that column indicate if it's a school or program? Is that what this is intended to do?
Yes. And the state, even though we made arguments before that we just want to do the schools, the state, as I was trying to allude to earlier, they can get very stubborn. We don't have seniors. I mean, some of those students at Bridges, those are all students from 18 to 21 years old. It's a different program for special ed services.
Okay, I'm gonna go there. 10 years ago, we had board directors on the dais saying, well, it's okay, it doesn't have to be correct. We just have to vote on it. We've made a lot of progress, and for that I am extraordinarily thankful. We did, however, this last year hear a great many testimonies from that very podium about CSIPs not being followed from school communities and being most upset about same, and there seemed to be a disconnect with respect to accountability and transparency. And the CSIPs are one of the few places where the board actually has a touch point on some of these issues because we have 2 employees. And I don't know what the answer is, and I appreciate that you're in a new position and that we've reorged and restructured and that we're taking a look at how we address supervision and accountability and transparency. But I'm extraordinarily distressed that we heard so much testimony this last year about Washington Middle School and the CSIP plan not being followed. And if this means anything, then there has to be another layer of something. I don't know what that is. I certainly will defer to the professionals in the room about how that works. But if we lose trust with folks, it takes us 10 times longer to earn it back. And that's really disturbing. So all that said, I'm still looking through them, and you can count on hearing comments, questions, and concerns before this goes for action. It's become a hobby for me. Director Burke.
Just to briefly touch on that concern and what Director Mack brought up, I want to remind all of us, but especially those of you that are going to be going on for longer, the work that has started around policy A02, performance management, because that is the place where policy governance intersects with the CSIP, intersects with accountability, intersects with district scorecard. It is the nut that we started working on across exec and CNI, spanning 2 committees, and was sort of put on hiatus while the strategic plan built a little bit stronger legs and wings. And so I guess I'm just going to encourage committee chairs to look at putting that work back on the work plan and elevating it and keeping that focus.
Director Mack?
I appreciate that ping because I think I appreciate Mr. Desi your response, but it wasn't. I still don't understand what the actual process is. I don't understand what the timeline would be, or if there's like after 6 months we do a check-in. There's no. In my mind, there is an internal process that happens, but there's no formalized process that I can point to and say, this is when there should be evaluation, this is how it's done, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm kind of looking for, would be interested in seeing more of.
So you know to expect that question at action, and hopefully we can brief on that issue. Number 2, approval of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding for the Seattle Intervention Tracking and Community Partner Access Grant. This came before ANF August 19th for consideration. Approval of this item would authorize the superintendent to accept grant funds totaling $698,406 over 2 years from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for the development of a community partner and school intervention tracking system. Take it away, Chief Berge.
Jolynn Berge, Chief Financial Officer. This grant proposal outlines funding for an intervention tracking and community partners access grant. This funding will aid in the development of a community partner and school tracking system to improve our ability to track interventions offered by community-based organizations and identify gaps in services. Currently, schools are building their own one-off spreadsheets, and this would give us a central repository which we can put in the interventions and have a way to measure that. So it will create a system for a flow of information with a central managed system, and it will enable our partners, school staff, and central office staff to input, track, and monitor interventions provided to each individual student in compliance with our student record policy, and it does not grant any additional access to any student data other than what the CBOs, community-based organizations, already have. There were 3 comments at Audit and Finance. We have amended the bar addressing those comments. Number 1, we corrected a number to reconcile the amount of the grant in the bar to the grant award. Number 2, we added in the policy implication part of the bar, we referred to the student records policy, policy 4231. And third, we were requested in the grant itself to add stronger language about following student privacy rights and access of that personal information, and that has been done on page 5 of the grant application. That concludes my remarks.
Comments, questions, concerns from my colleague? Director Mack.
I really appreciate that those additional things came in after committee and the conversation that we had. My question, or just clarification for transparency on this, is from my understanding, this money is for 2 years of work to put a system together, but it may not and does not include the cost of the system. So it is the researching of what exactly should this look like, but not necessarily this money is not going to pay for the actual system that will eventually be needed.
The grant, as I understand it, will pay for 2 positions. We will do requirements gathering with the schools and the community-based organizations to figure out what data and what the system needs to look like. The grant will also fund the development of the system. I believe you're talking about the ongoing maintenance costs, which we believe those to be very small in the out years. Not yet defined, but not so large that we have concerns.
Director Mack.
Okay, so just for clarification, because I had a different understanding from the committee meeting, this is actually the development of some database system. They're going to be building it, but so it's not an off-the-shelf thing. It's going to be utilizing some existing software, Excel, Access, one of those database systems, and it's going to tie into our existing systems, and they're going to bring it all together, and it's not going to be an additional cost, just the maintenance in the future.
Correct. We don't know yet what the system might be. That's not predetermined. That's part of what we'll go through in the discovery process. Whether or not it's something that we currently have that we amend, it's some off the, customizing off the shelf software or something different.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Director Burke.
So what I think I heard, and I'm trying to read here, 2 FTE, 3 years?
2 FTE, 2 years.
2 years. Okay, there's a 3-year time frame or 3-year kind of milestone. Is that?
What page are you referring?
I'm looking on essentially page of the grant document, this is the one that's got page 3 at the bottom. And this is the topmost box. It's basically page 7 of the bar. Talks about a 3-year, year 1, year 2, year 3. So does this investment just cover year 1 and year 2, and year 3 is fully?
I think what you're seeing is a difference between their calendar years and our school years. So this is running for us through 1920 and 2021. So I imagine for the Gates Foundation, it's 1920 and 21.
Yeah, it talks about year 3, 2021 to 2022, full systems implementation, managed and professional development brought in-house by the district.
Yep.
That implies that that's a
that's
no
us.
cost.
Yep, that's us
So-
standing it up and
Okay.
having it operational. So
So 2 FTE, 2 years. And would those be new staff or funding existing staff?
no, at this point, we believe there would be new staff.
Okay, thank you.
Director Pinkham.
I'm actually kind of flashing back to the other bar that we just approved about surveys and stuff. And what if our CBOs are politically affiliated, and then how that can possibly tie into our data? Now, do we risk having actually information here that identifies students based upon possibly these things if we connect it to our data?
I'm not sure. I feel like that may be outside the scope of this grant. That may be a different question.
Would that be a question for our legal counsel then, or? Because if we're trying to, again, we're tracking data. So let's say there's a religious CBO that's providing services, and
This is
could
about
that possibly share some information about a student if we tie it to our data?
So they follow our current data share policies, and they're offering interventions. So we're tracking student interventions, what's being provided to the student, and those outcomes. That's it, within the current structure of the policy. That's all I can say, is that we are careful when we are signing MOUs with every community-based organization. Both Ronald and I both review those to make sure that it is following that document and that policy. There are general terms and conditions in those MOUs that talk about non-allowed purposes of the data.
Could you clarify interventions, please, and give some examples of that to put this conversation in context, please?
Sure. So maybe someone is providing, let's say, tutoring. That's a pretty common example. So they've decided that they have a method. They're coming in and they're tutoring a child in reading for 30 minutes every day, or maybe they're talking about math, or maybe they have another program that talks about maybe how to build a child's self-esteem. So how that intervention looks in that program, what it is, and then whether or not they can measure outcomes in their system as well as for us.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on. Number 3, approval of grant from Amazon Future Engineer to support science, technology, engineering, and math STEM education activities. This came before A&F August 19th for approval. Approval of this item would authorize the superintendent to accept a grant from the Amazon Future Engineer in the amount not to exceed $300,000. Amazon is supporting up to 30 schools in the district to launch their Amazon Future Engineer program. First Washington Robotics, establishing and running a First Washington Robotics Club during the 2019-20 school year. And I want a shout out to our soup and our staff. When this first came in, so she went back and got more. The team went back and got more. And I believe that Director Burke will well remember at the Seafair Hydro races a year ago, when we were supposed to be making small talk and all that with the really big poobahs in the area, we ended up at the Washington First Robotics tent all day. And we convinced them to come show their program in real living color at SLI out at West Seattle High School in the lobby, because we couldn't get them on the program. It was already set. This is the kind of collaboration and leverage that we truly need. And given Amazon's reach, I hope we can exponentiate it in the future. The floor is yours, CAO DeBecker.
Thank you, President Harris. You have teed this up quite well. It is a result of a conversation that started earlier this spring with Amazon, where they wanted to bring the First Washington program into a few schools in Seattle. We actually declined their offer at that time. You, as a board, had just approved the strategic plan. We asked Amazon to please look at the strategic plan and see if they could expand it and tie it more to their program, to what we had in mind. And they came back to us with more schools. As you could see, there are up to 30 schools. We have 27 schools signed up so far to do this. We anticipate we'll get the other 3 very quickly after school starts. And then what this bar is for tonight is that there will be a $10,000 stipend or amount paid to each of those schools participating to do things beyond what's happening in the after-school programs, such as paying for entry fees if they go to competitions, paying for transportation. So the $10,000 per school will be decided on its use by the school, but it will also be coordinated through our Career and Tech Ed program, because we want that amount, that money, to go to enhancing the programs that will be there through the First Washington program.
Director Pinkham, comments, questions, concerns, sir?
Yeah, just looking through this, did we ask to list those 3 additional schools or not in this? Because those 3 additional schools are known.
No. At this time, we know 27. There are 3 openings.
But I thought we knew which 3 schools were being,
There are 27 schools that we know right now. Amazon is funding up to 30. So we have 3 spots still available.
but I thought we discussed which those 3 schools were, correct? Am I?
No, not to my recollection.
Well, let me check my notes, because I thought,
While you look at your notes, Director Mack?
I just also want to, if we could be really clear about what this specific grant is covering, and that there's a whole bunch of money that's going around the backside and not coming through our coffers that's funding this program, correct? So this $300,000 is specifically to support the students that access the program at those schools to have additional materials, however they need to spend it so that they can run the program. But the actual funding of the First Robotics after school program, the staff, etc., that's all covered, and that doesn't come through Seattle Public Schools, and that's paid directly by First Washington. I'm not sure if it's through grant. I don't remember what was stated, but just for clarification, this is just about the materials at these 30 schools
Correct.
and additional funding, but that the program is actually potentially running at way more schools than that are being funded through parents at the school or other whatever.
No. The after-school robotics program is being sponsored via Amazon, via First Washington. So that the after-school program is coordinated in that manner. This $10,000 going to each of the participating schools is coming through us. They are connected though, and so they are connected.
Director Pinkham?
okay, and the meeting that we had discussed this, it was shared with me that those 3 schools were Aki, Rainier, and World Schools. So for you to say no, I got a concern here. What's the message?
I will double check on that. They are not listed in the bar, the 27 schools listed in the bar on pages 2 and 3. I was not aware that we had a commitment from those 3 schools at this time.
Yeah, I think, that's what I was asking at the one meeting, and those were the 3 that were shared with me. And again, it was an open meeting, so I'm not violating anything here.
That's fine.
So I just want to see if that can get clarified.
We will have that clarified for you by the time this comes for action.
Director Mack?
I think I also remember requesting that it would be helpful to clarify how many students access these programs at each of the schools.
Yes, that is in the bar.
Okay,
Um,
great, thank you.
It is outlined there as to how many, how many students are depending on the grade level.
Okay, moving on. Number 4 on our list of 11 intro items, and our time check is 7:35? 7:41, excuse me. Okay, number 4, Discovery Research K-12, DRK-12, grant from the National Science Foundation. This came before ANF August 19th for approval. Approval of this item would authorize the superintendent to accept the Discovery Research K-12, DRK-12, in parens, grant from the National Science Foundation, which was awarded on July 1, 2019, in the amount of $500,000 per year for 3 years, for a total of $1.5 million for the 3-year grant period. Are you also presenting on that?
Yes, I am presenting on this.
Thank you. Take it away.
I'm very proud to announce that the Seattle Public Schools, recipient of a partnership grant with the University of Washington, a grant that is through the National Science Foundation. This is a grant that will help us in preparing our teachers, specifically our K through 5 teachers, on science and on pedagogy, and also having a partnership with the university in order to strengthen the use of the next generation science standards. This is a grant that has been sought after by the University of Washington for 4 years now. This is the 3rd time that they've applied for it. They were finally successful in getting that, so it's a long time coming. You were first notified of the grant, I believe, in a Friday memo in July. And with us today, if you have questions specifically about the grant and what will happen with it, we have Dr. Jessica Thompson from the University of Washington. She has graciously attended in case you have questions specifically about what will be happening. But it's a perfect timing for us, as you know, with the science standards and the science curriculum being approved later or earlier this spring. This allows us to strengthen the PD that those K through 5 teachers will get.
Comments, questions, concerns from my colleagues? Director Burke, then Director Mack.
I would like to learn a little bit about the activities around this grant and what we see as measures of efficacy from this work in past or related areas. I say that because, being candid, there's history around NSF funded programs that have potentially not improved student outcomes, and specifically the work around mathematics dismantled a lot of mathematics for a lot of students. And so I'm looking to see that this is something that we have, that we're not buying onto the front side of a treadmill that's going to create disadvantages for our students when we're trying to improve their access to sophisticated science and math and technology.
With your permission, President Harris, Dr. Jessica Thompson from the University of Washington.
So addressing your question about what activities will be involved, these are primarily activities that support the teachers in professional learning. Our team has been studying teacher learning for several years, and we are looking, so we're supporting the professional development for the teachers. As you know, before we can really look at student outcomes, we also have to look at teacher outcomes. And that's one of the things actually that the grant will help us do, is understand the process measures. So not just the outcome, but the process measures along the way, so that we can understand how teachers are learning and answer those questions about under what conditions and for whom, how are the teachers learning And we'll actually be doing some classroom observations and working with teachers to see how they're working on pedagogy in the classroom. And it'll actually give us a better lever so that we can actually understand any relationships to the student outcomes as well.
Also address his concerns about past National Science Foundation grants.
Yes, I don't know the mathematics NSF funded grants that you're referring to, but I think that what is important is to understand. I think these process measures are really important to understand, so that because we could just go ahead and do professional development and then hope for the best outcome. But if we can understand how teachers are learning along the way, then we can fine tune and improve the professional development so that we can get those better outcomes. So it really is, has the built-in, it actually is modeled off of the Carnegie Networked Improvement Communities, which looks at quick process measures, so we can do rapid cycles of looking at data and analyzing how teachers are learning, so we can respond very quickly to the improvements of the professional learning that we're providing.
Director Mack?
I had a question in committee, Ms. Becker, and about when and where we were notified of this grant, that this had been applied for well over a year ago, and we went through the entire science adoption and all of that going on, and I did not remember hearing about this, and so I was wondering if that research had been done, had been identified where we were notified and when.
We, as far as our own science community here, from Mary Margaret and our science team, we are aware that the University of Washington has applied for this 2 other times, because when they write a partner into that grant, that partner has to sign off on it. So we were aware that the grant was in process. Your application was due last November, so
So the application was due last November, but the board wasn't notified that this grant was being applied for.
I cannot answer that since I was not here at that
Because
time.
I asked the question during the committee, hoping that that it came out in a Friday memo, or it actually was stated in a meeting, and because I think I have recollection of asking specific questions around grants and not hearing about this.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we were not notified of this previously.
You were notified that the grant was received in early July. As whether or not you were notified back in November, I am not privy to that information.
Superintendent, and then Director Pinkham.
So yeah, I think the process, there are applications for grants in process a lot, and so we don't receive several, and we don't bring grants we are applying for until we actually receive them to the board, or that we're part of or members of or signing
Okay.
on to.
Director Pinkham, thank you. And Director Pinkham, then Director Burke.
Thank you for this. And I do see that there was a correction, but still, maybe with the professor from the University of Washington here, it used to say University of Washington Department of Education, but now we are saying University of Washington School of Education. I believe the correct name is College of Education. So we may, again, I know we corrected, at least got Department of Education changed, but now it says school. I asked that it say College of Education in the bar and the purpose. So if we can again make that change, College of Education. It's the School of Medicine. But this is the College of Education we're doing a grant with.
Director Burke.
I will look to Diane and your team around accountability measures. Just to restate, this board approved $5 million for professional development for a K-5 science adoption. This is an additional 1.5 million. There was some additional money in the middle school and the high school. This is the single largest investment by subject area that I have ever seen in the history of this district. I believe it's certainly larger than what the board has approved for our strategic goal of African American males reading by 3rd grade. So I just want to really put forth the gravity of this situation and the investment, and there needs to be incremental accountability.
And I'll follow that up and close the subject out. This board was buffeted for months on our new science curriculum. We passed it. That was then, this is now. But we did amend it from the dais that we would have a 4-year look at. And it would seem to me that, that this PD, and paying off of Director Burke's point, $5 million, does that mean that we can find other uses for the $5 million and have this grant supplant? I guess is one of my questions, if this money is newfound money, if you will. And I think the point that Director Mack was making, and I will elucidate that, for months, we were involved in quite controversial science adoption procedures, and it could not have been unknown that this grant was out there. And I, for one, as a board director, would have appreciated knowing about it. It's a question of trust and transparency. And I get that we apply for grants every week here, but that's a different case. The Amplify was quite controversial. Lots of information came to us, but the fact that this didn't is disturbing. Moving on. And thank you for coming, by the way. Much appreciate your help. And look forward to being asked really good, tough questions in the future. Number 5, Office of the Superintendent, Public Instruction, OSPI, Beginning Educator Support Team, BEST. Grant approval came before A&F August 19th for approval. Approval of this item authorizes the superintendent to accept the 2019-20 BEST grant in the amount of $300,000 and to implement the provisions of said grant. Dr. Codd, Chief of Human Resources.
Thank you. Good evening. So the BEST grant is awarded by OSPI to all school districts. It is not competitive grant. It's actually based on the number of novice teachers that you have in your district. The BEST grant funding we have received every year for the past 5 years. It flows through legislative action and comes to the school districts, but it is above the $250,000 threshold, so we do need to bring it before you for approval. This grant supports our PAR program and allows us to hire additional consulting teachers, who you may know as STAR consulting teachers. Under our new PAR program, we not only support our first-year teachers, we also support our second and third-year teachers who have not yet met the performance standards. This grant allows us to hire 2 additional consulting teachers, which allows us to lower the caseload overall for all of the teachers. The funding also supports the implementation of our foundational coursework, which is the professional development series that first and second year teachers will receive to increase their instructional skills and their cultural responsive teaching practices. Our goal really through PAR and thanks to this grant that helps us is to make sure that all of our third year teachers moving into the continuing status or tenure, as some people call it, fully meet our performance expectations and have the tools necessary to meet the needs of our students. So I'll open it up with questions.
Thank you. Comments, questions, concerns? I have a question about STAR Mentor teachers. When they become STAR Mentor teachers, are they STAR Mentor teachers as long as they wish to be, or do we have a 5-year limit and then return them to the teaching force and bring up other folks? I'm trying to figure out what the pipeline looks like here.
Yeah, so we call them STAR Mentor Consulting Teachers now because we also have the evaluation support consulting teachers under one umbrella. And they are 5-year terms, and they have to commit to going back into the classroom. So there is a rotation, and we are trying to think about making sure people are coming from the classroom, close to the classroom, helping other classroom teachers improve their instructional skill, and then getting them back into the classroom.
Other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none. Thank you, Dr. Cod.
I also have the next item.
Well, then you're not dismissed. Number 6, approval of the draft project agreement, quote, teacher diversity contract, end quote, between the City of Seattle Department of Education Early Learning, DEEL, and the Seattle Public Schools to diversify the educator workforce. This came before ANF August 19th for approval. Approval of this item would authorize the superintendent to execute the draft teacher diversity contract with the Department of Education and Early Learning, and accept the funds in the amount of $550,000 for the purposes of advancing diversity among the educator workforce. Take it away.
Sure. So as you are fully aware, our voters in the city of Seattle voted to approve the levy in November of 2018. And then on March 12th of 2019, the school board, you all approved the Families in Education Preschool and Promise Levy Partnership Agreement, the overall partnership agreement, accepting grant funds totaling $25,673,221. At the time of that, the City of Seattle Department of Education and Early Learning and our HR department, we were still discussing our overall approach and strategy to the teacher diversity portion of the Families in Ed levy. So it was not in what you originally approved on March 12th. I just want to make sure you understand. This grant is for $550,000.
This is in addition to the really big number
This
you
is-
read out.
This is
Okay.
in addition to the big number of 25 million something. So this grant award is $550,000. It's for the 2019-20 school year. We are available to apply and engage in this partnership in future years, but this is just a one-year grant at this point in time with, of course, we need to meet deliverables so that we can renew, but it is anticipated that we will be able to renew for at least the next 5 years. So this grant directly supports our strategic plan goal to have a culturally responsive workforce. The work plan in that strategic plan and the work plan outlined in this draft project agreement are the same. The grant supports our efforts aimed at recruiting, supporting and mentoring, and removing barriers for educators of color so that they can become teachers in our system. There are essentially 4 programmatic strategies that are outlined in the attached project agreement or teacher diversity contract. Number 1, Academy for Rising Educators. You heard Superintendent Juneau talk about that program in her comments and show pictures of that first inaugural cohort. That is for graduating seniors or adult learners in our own paraprofessional ranks or even in the community who do not yet have an AA degree. So it's a pathway for those adult learners who think they might want to be on the pathway to teaching, but they have not completed a college degree yet. And so we have a new pathway for them. We have the Classified to Cert program, which this grant also supports. Those are our current classified employees here in Seattle Public Schools who already have AA degrees or perhaps a BA degree, and then we help them on a pathway so that they can get their, finish out their BA if they need to and get their teaching credential. This grant also supports Seattle Teacher Residency, which you are fully aware of that program, which I know you're all in support of. And that helps our adult learners who already have a BA degree earn a master's degree. And then a new pathway, My Brother's Teacher, which is in partnership with the University of Washington and Deal to encourage males of color to become teachers in the early learning spaces. We're focused on not just recruiting and enrolling our adult learners into these different pathways and programs, but we are interested in making sure that they persist, like our lights, keep going, that they complete all their programming, so there's a mentorship and advising aspect, and then eventually, yes, get them hired into Seattle Public Schools and keep them in Seattle Public Schools. So We've got about $140,000 dedicated to direct tuition support. We've got $110,000 dedicated to a program coordinator who will oversee this entire project and also helps us with our recruitment of educators of color in general. And then $150,000 to the Seattle Teacher Residency, and $100,000 for My Brother's Teacher, which is a new pathway. And then, of course, we've got the indirect costs at the 9.8% indirect rate. So with that, I'll just open it up for questions.
So what's this, is this a new hire that you're talking about?
Yes, it has not. They have not been hired yet.
Okay. Sustainability concerns, obviously, and then, is this the same 25% holdback from deal that they do for, Seattle preschool partnership?
There is no 25% holdback that we've been talking about in our discussions. So there's nothing in our, if you look in the attachment, there's nothing about a 25% holdback. I'm not actually aware of what the 25% holdback is because it's not in my area and I haven't been paying attention to
Well,
that.
they call it performance pay. We call it being their banker. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Director Pinkham.
Thank you for this, and also to the City of Seattle on providing this grant opportunity and contract for us. And I'd asked, like, at the meeting, good to see the culturally responsive professional development preparation, and also the note of that Pathway 5 bilingual certification program. If maybe in the future, as we look at this, to also include some other diversity certifications or endorsements that schools may offer, if we can add that kind of support, if that can be possible, because as I noted, the University of Washington has a Native American kind of a tribal certification endorsement that is a summer program for students or teachers to go to, and I know it costs, and some people say, well, who's going to cover that cost? And if we can direct some funds there, that'd be fantastic.
Sure, and I think it's important for you all in the public to know that this strategy is iterative. We're constantly learning. We're engaging with our partners. They're giving us feedback. We have a new Office of African American Male Achievement. Keisha Scarlett is relatively new in her role, and so there's a lot of really good thinking that this opportunity, this grant, is really kind of bringing people together and helping us think about what the future of this could look like and how we could expand just in our strategies and our mentorship and our professional development. I'm really excited. There is an opportunity for this to be for the next 5 years. This just happens to be, for 1 year, $550,000 for 1 year, but we fully anticipate that this is an ongoing grant to the Human Resources Department.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none. 7, amendments to Superintendent Denise Juneau's employment agreement to address performance compensation amounts for 2019-20 and 2021 and base salary for 2019-20 to Exhibit A, performance evaluation compensation criteria, to the superintendent's employment agreement to change the bonus payment date from June 30th to September 30th and define previously undefined terms, and authorization for future salary discussions with the superintendent. This came before exec August 21st for approval. Approval of this item would increase the superintendent's base salary, set performance compensation amounts for the 2019 school year and the 2021 contract year. Approve an amended Exhibit A to the superintendent's employment agreement. Authorize the board president and board vice president to have salary discussions with the superintendent connected to her salary and bonus increases starting with the 2020-21 school year. And authorize the board president to execute Amendment 2 to the superintendent's employment agreement and to execute amended Exhibit A to the superintendent's employment agreement. Assistant Chief Counsel John Serqui, take it away.
Good evening, John Serqui, and I was asked by President Harris to assist in drafting of this bar involving the superintendent's compensation and items that are related to that. So the summary went through kind of the 4 items that this board action report proposes. One is to change the base salary. There is some discussion still. I wanted to put that on the record as to what other non-represented employees in the district will receive. The bar is written with an exact amount, but at action, it could be changed to say, I move that the board approve increase in the superintendent's base salary by the amount given to other represented management staff. So that's an option for you to consider between now and action. The other items to set the performance compensation, the bonus amount, it was listed in our original employment agreement at $15,000 per year. It was left open as to whether you wanted to change that amount. The executive committee has put forward $15,000 for the bonus amount, so that's going to set that in the contract for the next 2 years. Part of that discussion precipitated whether there should be ongoing salary discussions and retention discussions with the superintendent, which gets into the fourth prong about delegating salary discussions to the president and vice president, which this board authorizes those discussions to happen with those three individuals. Obviously, any final decision would come back to the board for action. And then it also amends Exhibit A. So Exhibit A was what we set staff and the board and the superintendent worked on the goals as to what would be the performance criterion for the next 2 years. And when this was approved by the board, we included percentages and percentage points inconsistently. So we are correcting that. It's 5 percentage points. So that is in the document. It's also moving the date as to when this bonus will be paid. We heard from Dr. Anderson that the vetted and valid data from
Dr. Anderson, who's the Director of Research and Evaluation, correct?
Thank you, yes.
You betcha.
That this data would be available and stronger data if it was what we had on September 1, so that now the bonus will be paid on September 30th if it is earned versus the June 30th date that was previously included. We just will not have good data to use by June 30th to determine whether the bonus has been earned. And then we wanted to define what students are furthest from educational justice. So there's a definition of that in the amended Exhibit A to include African, African American, Latinx, Native American, Pacific Islander, and Southeast Asian students. And those are the 4 items that are contained in this bar, if I can answer any questions.
Comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Serkwe. Number 8, BEX 4, Resolution 2019-20-5, acceptance of the building commissioning report for the Loyal Heights Elementary School Modernization and Addition Project. This came before OPS August 15th for consideration. Approval of this item would adopt Resolution 2019-20-5, accepting the building commissioning report for the Loyal Heights Elementary School project. Chief Podesta, take it away.
It's our practice at the closing of capital projects to hire a commissioning agent who is a quality assurance expert who inspects and determines to our satisfaction the mechanical systems and building systems are working appropriately. In this case, for Loyal Heights, the commissioning agent tracked 171 issues relating to building systems, HVAC, mechanical, and plumbing. And has since signed off on every one of them. At committee, there was one that was unresolved related to a gas meter that has since been resolved. And this is part of closing out a project. It's part of our OSPI process and releasing retainage payments to the contractors. So this means the project is done and somebody else has certified it.
Completely then close it out? Done, and done?
Done for these elements. There may be other contractual pieces that I'm not aware of, but for this, it's close.
Comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none. You're staying there. 9, BEX 4, BTA 4, approval of construction change order number 20 for the Lincoln High School Modernization and Addition Project. This came before OPS August 15th for approval. Approval of this item would authorize the superintendent to execute the construction change order number 20 for the Lincoln High School Modernization and Addition Project in the amount of $798,542.22, plus Washington State sales tax with any minor additions, deletions, and modifications deemed necessary by the superintendent and to take action to implement the change order. Take it away, Chief Podesta, please.
This authorizes payment for roughly 120 work items, ranging from things from a few $100s to tens of thousands of dollars that come up along the way with $93 million construction project.
In a historic building.
In a historic building, which those of you who've seen it is gorgeous. And I invite everybody to the ribbon cutting on September 3rd.
Are we still on budget on this one?
Yes, we are.
Director Mack?
Yeah, and for clarification, just so the public knows, this has been reviewed, and the change orders are reviewed also by Director Geary separately, and there's a metrics that we look at, which is 5, 10, or 15% over, and that this is well under
Yeah.
I can't remember. You have
I don't
the-
have the dollar figure. We have still ample room in our contingency, and yes, we go over these in detail. The project team does with it. Board director, Director Geary is fulfilling that role right now. And then they're also obviously talked about in Ops Committee as well.
Director Pinkham?
On one of the change orders, delete fire shutter, and so it looks like it's saving us almost $6,000. Was it not needed, or what?
Yeah.
Just curious, what is the fire shutter analysis?
I believe it's part of the separation system that's involved in the fire code. I don't know exactly what a fire shutter is, but it's, since there was enough remodeling inside the school, it was probably an extra component that was taken out of the system.
And if you come to the Lincoln ribbon cutting, you can ask
Yeah.
Richard Best, because I think Richard Best knows everything about every school in this
Ask
district.
him, I think you needed a fire shutter over there.
And I'll pay money to watch. Thank you. I want to ping off of what both Chief Podesta and Chair Mack said. Jill Geary, who is not with us tonight, our director, took it upon herself to read every change order on all of our capital projects as a volunteer basis, and with her legal background and her sharp eye, props. And this is not a lazy board, people. As you see, Director Pinkham often catches the errors, etc., and I'm proud to be a part of it. Moving on, number 10, Bex 5, and distress school grant, approval of 4 actions related to the West Woodland Modernization and Addition Project. This came before Ops August 15th for approval. Approval of this item would authorize the superintendent to enter into an architectural and engineering AE contract with McGranahan as architects in the amount of $1,638,228 plus reimbursable expenses not to exceed $25,000. Authorize the superintendent to accept and obligate 2017 distress school grant DSG funds in the amount of $6 million. Allow transfer of $2.5 million from the K-3 class size reduction grant to West Woodland Elementary School renovation and addition project, and allow transfers of $2.6 million from BEX 5 program contingency to the West Woodland Elementary School renovation and addition project. Take it away.
Again, this is to set up the initial architectural contract to begin work on the West Woodland modernization. That's a project that's going to go in construction June of 2020, and will have construction costs of roughly $13 million. The other financial aspects are assembling the budget for the project. So this is kicking off a piece of work and hiring the architect to help us design the changes that we're going to make to the building.
Questions, comments, concerns? Director Mack.
No, just a big thank you to, again, the capital team and folks for finding ways to fix issues in our buildings with limited funding and cobbling these different funds together for this one in specific, because it wasn't on X5 and is still something that's incredibly needed. So
And don't thanks also go out to the legislature for the distress schools grants?
Thanks go to the legislature. Thanks go to our teams that put those grant applications together. And yes, we have broad interest, as we've gotten from voters here and from the state.
Okay, and making this fit, allowing transfer from $2.5 million from the K-3 class size reduction. help me out with that, because anytime I see money going away from K-3 class size reduction, my initial cynical mind goes to bristle.
Well, and I would have to do a little bit further research, and we can when we bring this back for action, into where those savings came from. But we, with help from the operations committee, jealously guard our reserves and try to make savings along the way. So we need to, with whether it's a grant or levy funds, we always need to deliver the original scope. And but once there are savings, when that's done, we move money around to see if we can add value elsewhere.
Okay, can you update us on
Sure,
action on that one,
we can make,
please?
we can bring you detail when we come back for action
Perfect.
on what that is.
Director Pinkham, please.
Thank you. So for this modernization and addition project for Westwood, what's the anticipated budget for this? Because to me, this is just moving almost $12 million over there, but what was the budget for this project?
The anticipated construction budget is $13 million.
Okay, yeah, because would have been one thing I guess just kind of quash under the purpose at least. Maybe if we can add the total there, because I had to scroll down a while. Okay, how much does that add up to? But eventually down on the fiscal impact, it shows us the total amount.
Sure.
Could we put that total amount also up in the purpose?
Absolutely. Just to be clear, this action does the financial shifting in the background, but it's really only authorizing us to spend the 1.6 for the architect.
I appreciate that, but it looks like there's 4 or 5 different.
No,
and
there are a lot of moving parts in this bar.
Our taxpayers
I
are
understand it.
cynical, so we want to be as transparent as
No.
we possibly can be. Okay, last item, number 11, Beck Spore, Resolution 2019-20-3. Final acceptance of contract P5116 with Rhine Demolition LLC for the Wing Luke Elementary School Replacement Phase 1 project. This came before Ops August 15th for approval. Approval of this item would adopt Resolution 2019-20-3 as attached to the Board Action Report and accept the work performed under contract P5116 with Rhine Demolition LLC for the Wing Luke Elementary Replacement Phase 1 project as final. Take it away, Chief Podesta.
This is finalizing a piece of work. We had a demolition contract to demolish the former Wing Luke building so we can build a new one, and that work is complete and is complete to our satisfaction. So this allows us to close the contract and make the final payments to the contractor.
Comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 8:18 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And happy start of schools next week.